The Trump transition is drawing new fire tonight, and there's a talk of political knife fight behind the scenes, if you will, as President-elect Donald Trump fills out his cabinet.
At the latest flashpoint of controversy is Steve Bannon, one half of Trump's senior leadership team. KCAL9 political reporter Dave Bryan shows us why his ties to the alt-right and Breitbart News are drawing so much outrage, Dave.
Well, you know, one thing about the campaign we just went through and now the post-campaign is there's always plenty of controversy, and that hasn't changed tonight. After the Sunday night interview on 60 Minutes, during which Donald Trump projected a calmer, more presidential demeanor, the news that his former campaign chairman, Steve Bannon, has been chosen to be his chief White House strategist has created an uproar. And tonight it appears it has poured more gasoline on the fire. Less than a week since he was elected, President-elect Donald Trump has already touched off a fierce storm of controversy over his selection of Stephen Bannon as the chief strategist and senior counselor to the president, on equal footing with RNC Chairman Reince Priebus, who was named the White House chief of staff in the upcoming Trump administration. The selection of Bannon, who ran Trump's presidential campaign to a smashing upset victory, has touched off a flurry of criticism from hate watch groups. They're blasting his leadership of Breitbart News before he got involved in the campaign. Breitbart is the mothership for alt-right politics, which has sometimes featured anti-Semitic and white nationalist material, calling conservative columnist Bill Kristol a renegade Jew, and featuring an article charging that political correctness protects the Muslim rape culture. For years, Bannon has called for a takeover of the Republican Party.
What we need to do is slap the Republican Party and get those guys, heaving too. And if we have to, we'll take it over.
It's alarming.
Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, who represents Burbank and Hollywood, says Bannon's Breitbart connection is chilling.
When you look at the content that he has put out through his website, through his news service, it's very fringe, it's very homophobic often, it's often bigoted, it's often disparaging of women, and it often blows a dog whistle to any Semites that are out there. So in all those regards and others, it concerns me a lot. We don't need more bomb throwers occupying positions of power.
But Trump's campaign manager rejects charges like that about Bannon.
My response to that is that I work very closely with Steve Bannon. He's been the general of this campaign, and frankly, people should look at the full resume. He's got a Harvard business degree. He's a naval officer.
And when she was asked about Bannon's alleged connections to white nationalists,
I'm personally offended that you think I would manage a campaign where that would be one of the going philosophies. It was not.
The Bannon controversy has a Southern California connection. In 1996, Bannon was accused of domestic violence. The charges were later dropped. But after they were divorced, his former wife said in a court document a decade later that Bannon was opposed to sending their twin daughters to an LA private school because he didn't want the girls going to school with Jews. The school is the Archer School for Girls in West LA. Bannon has denied saying that. In response to his promotion in the upcoming Trump White House, the Anti-Defamation League released a statement about Bannon saying, "It's a sad day when a man who presided over a loose-knit group of white nationalists and racists is slated to be a senior staff member in the People's House." Rabbi Marvin Heyer, dean and founder of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in L.A., was not thrilled with the Bannon appointment, but he told our Randy Page,
"He's the senior counselor to the president. And the president's son-in-law is an Orthodox Jew, and the president's daughter converted to Orthodox Judaism. So I do not believe that he's going to be, can't wait till I get to my office, I can spout some more anti-Semitism. I don't think that's going to happen. As I said, I wouldn't have picked him.
The Southern Poverty Law Center said Trump should rescind this hire, Bannon should go. And House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi from San Francisco wrote, there should be no sugarcoating the reality that a white nationalist has been named chief strategist for the Trump administration. But House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy from Bakersfield told CBS this morning that Bannon is not responsible for everything you see on the Breitbart website.
I think you're putting a lot of things on that site onto Bannon, things that he probably doesn't have control over others. He's been out helped running a campaign of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has the opportunity to find those that he thinks that he trusts. They work together with Reince Priebus.
Now, tonight, the Trump camp is putting out some other trial balloons on possible cabinet members. The big one is former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, now emerging as the leading candidate to be Secretary of State. That was first reported by the Associated Press this evening.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of moving parts now.
It's true, and we do have more cabinet positions to fill. So any other names besides Rudy Giuliani coming up tonight?
There are a lot of balloons being floated tonight,
sure.
actually. It's kind of a parade of balloons right now. There are a few more trial balloons being released by Trump sources. One is that the two leading contenders for Attorney General are Rudy Giuliani and Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions. That report from the New York Times, the paper quotes people with knowledge of the process, who the paper says described a series of chaotic discussions on a number of cabinet positions. And one other item tonight, kind of interesting. The Washington Post reporting that President-elect Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed in a telephone conversation today to work together to build a strong and enduring relationship between their countries, and they agreed to get working on a face-to-face meeting sometime very soon, Lena.
All right, Dave, thank you.